She looked like just another cornfield pilot in old farm clothes. When disaster struck at 35,000 feet, F-35 jets appeared. She spoke one phrase, call sign Viper. The F-35 pilots immediately recognized who she was. Their shocked response revealed the legendary fighter pilot hidden in plain sight. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. The sun came up over Cedar Valley Regional Airport on Tuesday morning, May 12. It was 6 a.m. The small airport was quiet. Only a few people were there. Sarah stood near the window. She watched a Boeing 737 airplane getting ready for the morning flight to Chicago. She was 34 years old. Her dark hair was tied back in a simple ponytail. She carried only one small bag. Sarah wore a leather jacket that looked very old. Under it was a faded shirt with the words, Iowa State, on it. Her boots were worn from years of work. Her hands had calluses from flying planes every day. Flight 892 to Chicago O'Hare, now boarding all passengers, the airport worker said over the speaker. Sarah got in line with other passengers. There were business people in suits, families with children, and college students. Sarah moved in a special way. She walked like someone who was very fit and trained. But nobody noticed. Behind her in line stood Michael Thompson. He was 48 years old. Michael wore an expensive suit and a gold watch. He worked for a big company in Chicago. When he saw Sarah in her old clothes, he thought she was just a poor farmer. First time flying? Michael asked. His voice sounded kind, but he was being rude without knowing it. Sarah looked back at him. No, sir. I fly all the time. Oh really? What do you do? Michael asked. I'm a pilot, Sarah said quietly. Michael laughed. A pilot? You mean like those little crop duster planes? The yellow ones that spray the farms? Yes, I fly agricultural aircraft, Sarah said. I knew it. Michael said loudly. My cousin does that too in Texas. He says it's easy flying. Just straight lines over cornfields. Nothing like what these big airplane pilots do. These guys have thousands of hours of training. They use computers, radars, all kinds of technology. A young woman named Jennifer was standing in front of them. She was 22 years old and going to college in Chicago. She turned around when she heard them talking. Wow, that must be so different, Jennifer said to Sarah. I mean, going from tiny planes to a big Boeing 737 like this. The pilots here are so much more trained than crop dusters, right? All flying requires training, Sarah said politely. Michael laughed again. Come on, it's not the same at all. These airline pilots train for years. They use flight simulators. They deal with weather, emergencies, air traffic control. Your little farm flying is just going back and forth in good weather. No offense, but it's like comparing a bicycle to a race car. Sarah almost smiled but didn't. Every aircraft is different, she said simply. They walked onto the plane. Sarah had seat 12B. It was a middle seat. Michael had the window seat, 12A. Jennifer sat across the aisle in seat 12C. As they sat down, Michael kept talking. So, how did you get into crop dusting? I learned to fly in the military, Sarah said. Oh, the military. Let me guess. You flew transport planes? Carrying cargo? Sarah shook her head. What then? Helicopters? Michael asked. I flew fighter jets, Sarah said quietly. Michael laughed very loud. Fighter jets? Come on now. Women don't fly fighter jets. Maybe you worked on them or flew in the back seat. But the actual fighter pilots? Those are the top military people. Like Top Gun stuff. Sarah's face became hard. She looked at Michael with cold eyes. I flew F-35 Lightning fighters. F-35s. Michael was still laughing. Those are the most advanced jets in the world. They only let the absolute best pilots fly those. Not crop dusters. He stopped laughing when he saw Sarah's eyes. Something in her look made him uncomfortable. I mean, Michael said nervously, I'm sure you did good work in the military. Support work is important too. Sarah looked out the window. She said nothing. Jennifer leaned over. Don't listen to him. I think it's cool you were in the military. What did you really do? I was a fighter pilot, Sarah said. That's awesome. What kind of planes? Sarah closed her eyes. I don't want to talk about it. The flight attendants started their safety talk. Sarah watched them carefully. She noticed where all the emergency exits were. She saw where the oxygen masks were stored. She knew where the life jackets were kept. Captain James Wilson was in the cockpit. He had been flying for United Airlines for 12 years. Next to him was First Officer Lisa Chin. She had 6 years of experience. Weather looks good today, Captain Wilson said over the speaker. Flight time to Chicago should be about 1 hour and 30 minutes. We are second in line for takeoff. We should be in the air in about 8 minutes. Sarah checked her watch. It was 6:25 a.m. As the Boeing 737 moved toward the runway, Sarah's mind went back to another time. 7 years ago, she had been Captain Sarah Martinez. Her military call sign was Viper. She flew F-35C Lightning fighters. She remembered one morning mission over enemy territory. The weight of the fighter jet. The heads-up display showing enemy targets. The radio voice of her wingman. Viper, this is command. You are cleared for the mission. Good luck. Command, Viper copies. Ready to engage. That was her last combat mission. She shot down 4 enemy fighters in 15 minutes. Military experts said it was one of the greatest air battles in modern history. Now she was sitting in a middle seat on a passenger plane. The man next to her was explaining why women couldn't be fighter pilots. Ladies and gentlemen, we are cleared for takeoff. Please prepare for departure, Captain Wilson said. The Boeing 737's 2 engines got louder. Sarah felt the plane move faster and faster. Then they lifted off the ground. No matter what plane she was in, that feeling never got old. Michael was holding his armrest very tight. I hate this part, he said. Takeoffs always make me nervous. Sarah looked at him with amusement. This man who just explained how dangerous flying was scared of a normal takeoff. It's very safe, Sarah said. These pilots know what they're doing. I know, Michael said. It's just scary to trust your life to people you don't know. At least with your crop dusting, you control your own plane. If only he knew, Sarah thought. She had flown into war zones. Enemy missiles had tried to shoot her down. A normal takeoff from Iowa was as safe as drinking water. 30 minutes into the flight, they were flying at 35,000 feet. Sarah was starting to relax. Maybe this flight would be normal. Maybe she could just be Sarah the crop duster for 2 more hours. Then everything changed. First, there was a loud bang from somewhere in the plane. Then the whole aircraft shook very hard. Several passengers hit their seatbelts hard. What was that? Michael shouted. His face turned white. Before anyone could answer, the plane turned hard to the right. The oxygen masks fell from the ceiling. People started screaming. A baby started crying. Someone in the back yelled, "We're going to crash." Captain Wilson's voice came over the speaker. He tried to sound calm. Ladies and gentlemen, we have some technical problems. Please stay in your seats. Put on your oxygen masks right now. Flight attendants, take your seats. Sarah had her oxygen mask on in 2 seconds. Her training took over automatically. She looked around and understood what was happening. Loss of cabin pressure meant a hole in the plane or the pressure system failed. The way the plane was moving meant the flight controls had problems. This wasn't just a small problem. This was many systems failing at the same time. Michael was trying to put on his oxygen mask. His hands were shaking. This can't happen. These big planes are safe. They have backup systems. Jennifer was crying across the aisle. She couldn't get her mask on right. Sarah reached over and helped her. She spoke in a calm, strong voice. Listen to me. Breathe normally. The mask is working. You're going to be okay. Jennifer looked at Sarah with scared eyes. How can you be so calm? We're going to die. No, we're not, Sarah said with complete confidence. The pilots are trained for this. The plane can handle it. But even as she said this, Sarah's trained ear heard bad sounds. The engines weren't running smooth. There were vibrations that shouldn't be there. And the plane was slowly going down. The pilots couldn't stop it. Another hard shake hit the plane. This time the lights went off and on. Several overhead bins opened. Bags fell into the aisles. Sarah unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up. "Ma'am," called a flight attendant named Amy. She was trying to stay standing in the aisle. "Please sit down. We have an emergency." "I know we do," Sarah said. She walked toward the front of the plane. Even though the plane was shaking, she walked steady, like someone who had done this many times before. "I need to talk to the pilots. I'm a pilot and your crew needs help." "I'm sorry, but passengers can't go to the cockpit during." "I'm not just a passenger," Sarah interrupted. Her voice had authority that made Amy stop talking. "I'm a trained pilot and right now those pilots need all the help they can get." Michael shouted from his seat. "She's just a crop duster. She can't help with this." Sarah ignored him. She walked to the cockpit door and knocked hard. "Captain, this is Major Sarah Martinez. I'm a military pilot and I need to help." "Go away," came the voice from inside. "We're dealing with an emergency." Sarah took a deep breath. She hadn't used her call sign in 4 years. But lives were at risk now. "Captain, this is Major Sarah Martinez, call sign Viper." "I repeat, call sign Viper. Open this door now." Silence from the cockpit. Then she heard First Officer Chen's voice. "Did she say Viper?" More talking inside. Then the sound of locks opening. The cockpit door opened. Captain Wilson looked out. His face was covered in sweat. He looked very stressed. "Did you say call sign Viper?" he asked quietly. Sarah nodded. "Yes." Captain Wilson stared at her for a long moment. Then he stepped back. "Come in." Sarah entered the cockpit. She immediately saw why the pilots were struggling. The control panel had warning lights everywhere. Alarms were making loud noises. The plane was fighting against the controls like a wild horse. "Oh my God," whispered First Officer Chen. She was staring at Sarah. "You're the Viper. The F-35 pilot from the Iran mission. Right now, I'm the pilot who's going to help you save this aircraft," Sarah said. She sat in the jump seat behind them. "What's your status?" Captain Wilson was fighting the controls. His muscles were tight. "We lost hydraulic system A completely. System B is failing. Engine number 2 shows compressor problems. The flight computer is giving us wrong information. We're losing altitude and I can't stop the descent." Sarah's eyes moved across the instrument panel fast. Her fighter pilot training let her see many things at once. She saw the problem right away. You have a cascade failure from the hydraulic loss, she said calmly. The flight computer is trying to fix control surfaces it can't verify. Engine 2 isn't really failing. It's getting bad commands from a computer that's confused. Can you fix it? First Officer Chen asked desperately. Sarah was already reaching for controls. Switch to manual control on the primary flight systems. Turn off the autopilot and auto throttles. Go full manual. But the procedure says, Captain Wilson started. The procedure wasn't written for this exact failure, Sarah cut him off. I've seen this before in combat when battle damage caused multiple system failures. Trust your basic instruments. Ignore the warnings. Fly the airplane, not the computers. Captain Wilson hesitated for just a moment. Then he started following Sarah's instructions. The violent shaking started to get less. Good, Sarah said. Now restart engine 2 using the auxiliary power unit. The engine is fine. The computer just thinks it failed. First Officer Chen started the restart procedure. Engine 2 came back to normal operation. How did you know that would work? Captain Wilson asked, amazed. Because I've had every system on an F-35 Lightning fail at the same time while dodging surface-to-air missiles over Iran, Sarah said matter-of-factly. When you're flying at Mach 1.6 and people are shooting at you, you learn to tell the difference between real failures and computer confusion very fast. The plane was flying much smoother now. They still had limited hydraulic systems and damaged flight controls. But it was under control. Sarah pressed the radio button. Chicago Center, United 892. We have a former military pilot helping the crew. Requesting immediate priority for emergency landing at nearest suitable airport. United 892, Chicago Center. Roger. Understand you have additional pilot assistance. What is your emergency and how many people on board? Chicago Center, United 892. We have multiple system failures including hydraulic systems and flight computers. We have 156 souls on board. Declaring emergency. Need vectors to nearest airport with emergency equipment ready. United 892, turn left heading 080. O'Hare International is 92 miles northeast. Emergency equipment will be standing by. Can you maintain current altitude? Sarah looked at the instruments. We can maintain altitude with manual control. But we need a straight-in approach. No holding patterns or long vectors. Roger, United 892. You're cleared direct O'Hare. Descend and maintain flight level 250. As Sarah worked with air traffic control, both commercial pilots were staring at her with shock and respect. You really are her, aren't you? Captain Wilson said quietly. Viper. The pilot who won the Battle of Tehran. Sarah didn't look away from the instruments. That's classified, Captain. The Air Force released some information last year, Wilson said. 4 enemy fighters destroyed in one engagement. You saved an entire Special Forces team that was surrounded. They were going to die without air support. I did my job, Sarah said simply. Your job? First Officer Chen shook her head in disbelief. Ma'am, you're a legend. Every military pilot knows about call sign Viper. They teach your tactics at fighter weapons school. They teach improved versions of my tactics, Sarah corrected. The enemy learns. We have to learn faster. Captain Wilson was working the radios. Why aren't you still flying fighters? Someone with your skills. Sarah's face became hard. Budget cuts. Political decisions. Congress decided the future of air combat was drones and missiles. They didn't need expensive human pilots anymore. That's crazy, Wilson said. You just proved exactly why we need pilots like you. No computer could have diagnosed this problem and solved it so fast. Try explaining that to a politician who's never been in an airplane, Sarah said bitterly. The radio crackled with a new voice. United 892, this is Falcon flight of two F-35 Lightning fighters. We've been scrambled to escort you to O'Hare. How can we assist? Captain Wilson reached for the radio. But Sarah stopped him. Let me handle this. She pressed the button. Falcon flight, this is call sign Viper aboard United 892. Complete silence on the radio. Then, say again, United 892. Did you say Viper? Falcon flight, this is Major Sarah Martinez, call sign Viper. I'm aboard United 892 helping with emergency procedures. The radio exploded with excited voices. Holy! It's actually Viper. The Viper from the 355th Fighter Wing. Ma'am, this is Falcon 1, Lieutenant Colonel Anderson. It's an incredible honor. The entire fighter community knows your record. Sarah smiled for the first time since the emergency started. Thank you, Falcon 1. Right now, I need you to coordinate with O'Hare Tower. We're coming in with damaged flight controls and limited hydraulics. Make sure the runway is clear and emergency equipment is ready. Absolutely, ma'am. Consider it done. Falcon flight will clear the airspace and coordinate emergency response. Through the cockpit windows, Sarah could see the two F-35 Lightning fighters take position on both sides of the airliner. Her heart hurt as she watched them. Those beautiful, deadly aircraft represented everything she had trained for. Everything she had been excellent at. Everything she had lost. Why did you really leave the Air Force? First Officer Chen asked quietly. Sarah watched the F-35s flying perfectly alongside them. Politics. After the Iran mission, I became too visible. Too much media attention. The Pentagon didn't want a female pilot getting all the recognition. Then the budget cuts came. They used it as an excuse to force out experienced pilots they considered problematic. Problematic? Captain Wilson was shocked. You're probably the best combat pilot of your generation. I was also a woman who made some male officers uncomfortable, Sarah said flatly. And I had opinions about tactics that didn't match current military doctrine. So when it came time to cut people, my name was at the top of the list. The approach to O'Hare was tense but controlled. Sarah walked the crew through every step. Her voice stayed calm and professional even as they dealt with multiple system failures. United 892, O'Hare Tower. Runway 10 right is clear. Emergency equipment is in position. Wind is 090 at 12 knots. You're cleared to land. O'Hare Tower, United 892. We're on final approach. Be advised we may need maximum runway length due to control difficulties. Sarah helped Captain Wilson manage the approach. The aircraft was slow to respond and needed constant correction. But her fighter pilot experience let her predict problems before they happened. Airspeed is good, she called out. Watch your sink rate. There. Bring the nose up a little. Good. The Boeing 737 hit the runway hard but safely. Emergency vehicles raced alongside as they rolled out. They were ready for the worst. In the cabin, passengers cheered and clapped. Many were crying with relief. The terrible hour-long emergency was over. Sarah unbuckled from the jump seat and stood up. Excellent flying, gentlemen. You handled a very difficult situation with skill and professionalism. Captain Wilson grabbed her hand. Major Martinez. Sarah. We couldn't have done this without you. You saved 156 lives today. We all did our jobs, Sarah said. That's what professionals do. But as she turned to leave the cockpit, both pilots called out to her. Major, First Officer Chen said, I don't care what the politicians in Washington think. You belong in a cockpit. The Air Force made a huge mistake letting you go. Sarah paused at the door. The Air Force will survive without me. They always do. She walked into the main cabin. Passengers were still celebrating their safe landing. Flight attendant Amy came up to her with tears in her eyes. "Ma'am, I don't know what you did up there, but Captain Wilson just announced you saved the flight. I'm so sorry I tried to make you sit down earlier." "You were doing your job," Sarah said. "No apology needed." Michael Thompson, the insurance man who had explained why women couldn't be fighter pilots, was sitting in his seat. He looked pale and sick. When he saw Sarah coming, he stood up awkwardly. I owe you an apology," he said with a shaking voice. "And my life. The captain just told us who you really are. I said such stupid, terrible things." Sarah looked at him calmly. "Mr. Thompson, you made assumptions based on how I looked. We all do that sometimes. But I was so wrong. So completely wrong. You really are a fighter pilot. An F-35 pilot. And you just saved all of us." "I was a fighter pilot," Sarah corrected. "Now I dust crops. Both are honest work." Jennifer, the college student, was staring at Sarah with shock and embarrassment. "I can't believe we spent the whole time talking about how simple crop dusting was compared to real flying. You must have thought we were such idiots." "I thought you were making conversation," Sarah said kindly. "Most people don't know much about agricultural flying or military flying. There's no reason you should." "But F-35s." Jennifer shook her head. "Those are the most advanced fighters in the world. And you flew combat missions? Actual combat?" Sarah nodded briefly. "I served my time. Now I do something else." As passengers left the aircraft at O'Hare, each one stopped to thank Sarah. Some shook her hand. Others were too emotional to speak. A few wanted selfies, which she politely refused. "Ma'am," said an old man who had been sitting in the back. "My son is an Air Force pilot. He's going to lose his mind when I tell him I flew with the legendary Viper." Sarah smiled. "Tell him to fly safe and always bring his crew home. That's what matters." Finally, the plane was empty except for Sarah and the crew. Captain Wilson and First Officer Chen were finishing their paperwork. They stopped when Sarah came up. "Major," Wilson said, "I meant what I said earlier. Have you thought about returning to aviation? The airlines desperately need experienced pilots. With your background and what you showed today." Sarah shook her head. "Captain, I appreciate it. But I'm done with that world. I found peace in crop dusting." "Dusting crops?" Chen asked with disbelief. "After flying the most advanced fighters ever built? After proving today that you have skills no simulator can teach? There's something to be said for flying alone over quiet farmland," Sarah replied. "Nobody shoots at you. No politics. No egos. Just you, the aircraft, and the sky." She picked up her bag. "Besides, farmers need their crops protected just like soldiers need air support. Different mission. Same principles." As Sarah walked toward the exit, Captain Wilson called out one last time. "Major, what you did today was extraordinary. You didn't just save 156 lives. You reminded us what it means to be a pilot." Sarah stopped at the door. "Captain, for 1 hour today, I got to be Viper again. That was enough." Outside on the ramp, the two F-35 pilots who had escorted them were waiting by their aircraft. They stood at attention as Sarah approached. "Ma'am," said Falcon 1, Lieutenant Colonel Anderson. "It's an honor to finally meet you in person. We've studied your Iran mission in our tactical training courses." Sarah looked at the two young pilots. They reminded her of herself 12 years earlier. Confident. Eager. Ready to take on the world. "How long have you been flying F-35s?" she asked. 2 years, ma'am," replied Falcon 2, a young captain who looked barely 25 years old. "The F-35 is an amazing aircraft," Sarah said. "More capable than anything I flew early in my career. But remember, all the technology in the world can't replace good judgment and situational awareness." "Yes, ma'am," both pilots said. "And remember," Sarah added with a slight smile, "the most advanced weapon system is still just a tool. What matters is the pilot using it." The F-35 pilots saluted as Sarah walked away toward the terminal. She could hear them talking excitedly behind her. "Can you believe we just met Viper? Wait until the squadron hears about this. Did you see how calm she was? Even dealing with a passenger plane emergency." Inside O'Hare's huge Terminal 1, Sarah found a quiet coffee shop. She ordered black coffee and sat down. She pulled out her phone and called her employer back in Iowa. "Hello, Tom. It's Sarah. Yeah, the flight was delayed. Equipment problems." "No, nothing serious. Listen, I should be back tomorrow afternoon. Did the weather hold for the Johnson fields?" "Good. I'll finish the corn application first thing Thursday morning." As she talked about pesticide schedules and weather patterns, business travelers rushed past without looking at her. She was invisible again. Just another rural pilot talking about farm work. But on the television above the bar, CNN was showing breaking news. Emergency landing at O'Hare Airport this morning was successfully completed with help from a passenger who turned out to be a decorated military pilot. Sources tell us the pilot was a former F-35 fighter pilot with the call sign Viper. She is credited with multiple aerial victories in classified combat missions. Sarah glanced at the TV. Then she went back to her phone call. "No, Tom, I don't need time off. I like staying busy. The Henderson farm next week?" "Sure, I can handle that. Soybeans need treating before the first frost." She hung up and sat back in her chair. She drank her coffee slowly. Around her, the busy terminal continued its daily rhythm. Thousands of travelers rushing to catch flights. Coming home from business trips. Starting vacations. None of them paid any attention to the woman in the faded jeans and work boots. 4 days later, Sarah was back in Iowa. She was flying her yellow air tractor at 602 crop duster over cornfields. Her phone rang. It was Colonel Martinez, her old commander from the 355th Fighter Wing. "Sarah, what happened on that United flight reminded everyone why the Air Force needs pilots like you. We want you back." "The Air Force made its position clear 4 years ago," Sarah said as she lined up for another spray run. "Budget problems. Changing requirements. Too many personnel. I got the message." "That was then. This is now, Sarah. We're facing a pilot shortage crisis. Experienced combat pilots are leaving faster than we can train new ones. We need our best pilots back in the cockpit." The offer was very generous. Full reinstatement at her old rank. Command of an elite training squadron at Nellis Air Force Base. Promotion to lieutenant colonel within 12 months. "I need time to think about it," Sarah said. That evening, Sarah sat on her front porch. She watched F-35s fly overhead in the distance. Her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Lieutenant Anderson, the young pilot she met at O'Hare. "Ma'am, I'm at Nellis AFB now starting advanced F-35 training. I hope you come back to the Air Force. We need pilots like you to train us." Sarah stared at the message for a long time. Young pilots like Anderson were counting on experienced pilots to teach them about combat flying. About survival. The next evening, Captain Wilson and First Officer Chen drove down from Chicago to her farmhouse. "Sarah," Wilson said, "we needed to thank you in person. Without you, everyone on that airplane would have died. More importantly," Chen added, "if the Air Force stops producing pilots like you, the entire aviation industry suffers." Your decision affects every future passenger who might someday need a pilot with your skills. After they left, Sarah called Colonel Martinez back. Carlos, it's Sarah. I have conditions. Name them. I want to train pilots, not fly a desk. I want authority to develop new tactics. And I want guarantees that experienced pilots won't be cut in future budget problems. 3 days later, Martinez called back with good news. The Chief of Staff wants to meet you personally. You've got command of the 65th Aggressor Squadron at Nellis. Full colonel rank within 18 months. And personal protection from future cuts. Sarah looked out at her cornfields one last time. I accept. 3 weeks later, Colonel Sarah Martinez stood on the flight line at Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada. She wore a flight suit with her old call sign embroidered on the name tag, Viper. Her new squadron of elite pilots gathered around for their first briefing. My name is Colonel Sarah Martinez, call sign Viper. I'll be your new squadron commander. A young captain raised his hand. Ma'am, what's the most important thing we need to know? Sarah thought about Flight 892. About Lieutenant Anderson. About the cornfields of Iowa. About all the lessons she had learned. The most important thing is this: no matter what aircraft you're flying, no matter what the mission is, your job is to bring everyone home. Everything else is just details. The young pilots sat forward in their seats. They were ready to learn from a legend. Now, Sarah continued with a slight smile, let's talk about what to do when every system on your F-35 fails at the same time while you're being shot at. Because trust me, it will happen. And when it does, you need to know the difference between real problems and computer confusion. For the next 2 hours, Colonel Sarah Martinez taught her squadron everything she had learned in combat. The young pilots listened to every word. That evening, Sarah stood alone on the flight line. She looked at the rows of F-35 Lightning fighters. The setting sun made them glow orange and red. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Tom, her old crop dusting employer in Iowa. Sarah, I heard the news. Congratulations on going back to the Air Force. The cornfields will miss you, but you belong in the sky doing what you do best. Sarah smiled and typed back, thanks, Tom. I'll always remember those quiet mornings over the cornfields. They taught me that good flying is good flying, whether you're in an F-35 or a crop duster. She put her phone away and walked toward her assigned F-35. Her crew chief, a young sergeant, was doing the pre-flight inspection. Colonel Martinez, ma'am. Your aircraft is ready. Would you like to take her up for a familiarization flight? Sarah ran her hand along the smooth skin of the F-35. It felt like coming home. Yes, Sergeant. Let's fly. 30 minutes later, Colonel Sarah Martinez, call sign Viper, was back in her natural element. The F-35 responded to her every command like an extension of her own body. She climbed to 40,000 feet and looked down at the Nevada desert below. For 4 years, she had been just a crop duster. A simple pilot flying over cornfields. But now she was Viper again. And this time, she was home to stay. The radio crackled. Viper, this is Nellis Tower. Welcome back, ma'am. It's good to have you in the sky again. Sarah smiled inside her helmet. Nellis Tower, Viper. It's good to be back. She pushed the throttle forward. The F-35 accelerated smoothly. The sky opened up before her like an old friend welcoming her home. Colonel Sarah Martinez, call sign Viper, was exactly where she belonged. And she would make sure that every young pilot she trained would be ready for the day when all their systems failed, when the computers gave them bad information, when the mission seemed impossible. Because that's what real pilots do. They bring everyone home. No matter what.